Okay, so the US just made a massive decision to pull troops out of Germany, and it is sparking a geopolitical chain reaction. We are looking at a moment that is literally sending shockwaves through the global defense architecture. Because, this isn't just about moving soldiers from one base to another. It's a fundamental shift in how the world's most powerful alliances operate. And honestly, it could completely rewrite the map of global security.
To really get why this is such a big deal, you have to hear this warning from the Balkans. Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić isn't just calling this some routine military reshuffle. He's calling it a historic Western split and a point of no return. When a leader operating right on the geopolitical fault lines of Europe says the foundation of the US-European relationship is fracturing in real time, we definitely need to pay attention.
Here's the roadmap for this explainer. 1. A point of no return. 2. The epicenter of tension. 3. Reshaping the military footprint. 4. A transactional NATO alliance. And 5. The global power shift.
All right, Section 1, a point of no return, and the end of post-World War II unity.
So President Vučić characterized this withdrawal as a watershed political statement. Basically, he's pointing out that the geopolitical interests of Washington and Berlin, they just don't coincide anymore. It marks the formal beginning of a progressive standoff. See, for decades, the assumption was always that the US and Europe essentially wanted the exact same things out of global security. But this signals a definitive divergence, completely reshaping the global security architecture that keeps the world's major power blocks in check.
Moving to Section 2, the epicenter of tension, tracing the breakdown.
The timeline of this breakdown is honestly kind of staggering. Just look at how fast this all went down. Days prior to the announcement, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz publicly criticizes US strikes on Iran. Then, literally hours later, Donald Trump is on Truth Social suggesting a troop reduction in Germany. Fast forward to May 1st, and boom, the Pentagon officially announces a 5,000 troop withdrawal. This wasn't some slow, decades-long strategic pivot. It was a rapid-fire sequence of events triggered by a very specific public disagreement over Middle Eastern policy.
So what kicked this all off? Chancellor Merz didn't hold back his grievances. He was pretty upset that the US and Israel launched strikes without giving European allies a heads up. He pointed out the lack of a clear exit strategy, even drawing some painful comparisons to the 20-year conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. And practically speaking, he highlighted a massive fear for everyday citizens. If the Strait of Hormuz gets closed off, it drastically impacts Germany's economy and energy supply. Finally, he flat out stated he felt the Americans got completely outmaneuvered in the peace negotiations. That level of public criticism from a key ally set the immediate stage for the American response.
Section 3. Reshaping the military footprint and the numbers behind the rift.
Let's talk numbers, because Germany is absolutely the undisputed hub of the U.S. presence in Europe. We're talking roughly 35,000 active duty U.S. personnel. That totally dwarfs Italy at 12,000 or the U.K. at 10,000. Globally, only Japan hosts more American troops than Germany. It's home to critical infrastructure, like the U.S. European Command and Africa Command. So pulling forces from Germany isn't just emptying some random outpost. It is literally tearing out the traditional heart of the U.S. military presence in Europe. And the magic number here is 5,000. The Pentagon is officially pulling 5,000 troops out of Germany, and they're planning to get this done fast, completed over the next 6 to 12 months. That is a massive chunk of personnel, moving incredibly fast by typical military standards.
To put that 5,000 in perspective, this rolls the U.S. military presence all the way back to pre-2022 levels. The previous administration built up those forces specifically to deter Russian aggression right before the Ukraine invasion. By reversing it, Washington is sending a highly visible message. Priorities have changed, and the U.S. is fully willing to alter its defensive posture in Europe.
Which brings us to Section 4, a transactional NATO alliance and clashing geopolitical strategies.
We are literally watching two totally different mindsets collide right now. On one side, Europe expects post-World War II transatlantic unity. They want strategic consultation, shared values, and guaranteed mutual defense. That's exactly why Chancellor Merz was complaining he expected a phone call before strikes were launched. But on the flip side, you have this new isolationist transactional policy. In this view, which is championed by Donald Trump, defense support is not an automatic guarantee. It's highly conditional on allied participation in U.S. interests and on immediate burden sharing. It's a fundamental mismatch in how the two sides view the entire purpose of the alliance. And look, this friction extends well beyond Berlin. Take Italy. Even though they host 12,000 U.S. troops, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was accused by Trump of lacking courage regarding the Iran conflict. Or Spain. Spain hosts key U.S. naval and air bases, but they completely refuse to let their airspace or bases be used for the strikes on Iran. Trump called Spain's lack of support absolutely horrible. So Washington is seeing this widespread collective failure of its European allies to step up in the Persian Gulf. Trump is looking at this through an entirely transactional lens, and he ties his frustration directly back to the war in Ukraine. He's arguing, hey, the U.S. spent $350 billion to defend Europe's front door, but when Washington needed help with Iran, the allies vanished. They cited economic fears, like the Strait of Hormuz, and just stayed out of it. And because he sees it as this one-way street, he has openly labeled NATO a paper tiger.
Finally, Section 5, the global power shift and the ripple effect abroad.
The ripple effects of this single decision are pretty profound. If the U.S. retreats, it leaves vulnerable regions, especially the Balkans, scrambling to reevaluate their security dependencies. It creates a dangerous security vacuum in Central Europe. Serbian officials are already warning that this void could throw the door wide open for heavy influence from Moscow or Beijing. And it actually gets crazier. Reuters reports indicate internal Pentagon discussions are reviewing options to pressure other allies. This includes reviewing the U.S. position on Britain's claim to the Falkland Islands and maybe even suspending Spain from NATO. The entire web of Western security is suddenly under review.
So this whole chain reaction really just leaves us with one massive defining question for the future of the West. With Washington aggressively shifting its footprint and signaling a highly conditional, transactional approach to its alliances, is Europe actually ready to take primary responsibility for its own security? The shockwaves in Berlin suggest they are absolutely not. But as those troop numbers drop, they might no longer have a choice.